This is the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast with your host, Kevin Murray.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. On this episode, we have a guest that has had a massive impact on the fantasy sports community. The one and only Scott Fish recently said this to me about our guest. He is one of my favorite people and invaluable to Fantasy Cares. He is truly one of the nicest, most understanding and caring people I have the pleasure of interacting with routinely. The world needs more people like him. It is my pleasure to welcome to the show Dynasty Outhouse himself, Russ Fisher. Welcome to the show, my man.
I'm just saying that if I knew that was coming, you might not have had me, but I'm here and it happened, and I'm not blushing at all.
Scott went on to say, I will never be able to fully thank him for how much he has helped me, been there for me when I need to talk, or simply for how he is helping Fantasy Cares be as great as it can be.
I know I did it before, but let me quickly
sip on the Fantasy Cares cup. I love it. So for those listeners and viewers that may not know, what is Fantasy Cares and what is your current role with the charity?
Well, like you said, Fantasy Cares, we're a charity. We are a 501c3 charity, which means federally recognized, which means all your donations you make to us are tax deductible. Just putting it out there. What our mission to say is, fantasy football at its core, fantasy sports at its core is a game, and which means we play this game with extra money we have. So why not put that extra money to good use? You play your game. Why not? I mean, Scott says put one buy-in to charity, but why stop there? I run far too many leagues. We average a little over 2 buy-ins. My average buy-in is $42 because 42 is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything, if you're a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan. But we end up putting $108 from every league to charity, and the 8 is there because I had $8 extra when planning out buy-ins. So there you go. And of course, we would love for it to come to Fantasy Cares. If not, anywhere, just putting it to good use. A cause you believe in, a cause you have a close personal connection to. Again, this is all funny money. It's all silly money. It's all extra money. So why not do good with it? Fantasy Cares ourselves. We're still growing with what we actually are doing with it. We've donated a ton of money to just random charities, throughout the years, but our big cause still at the end of every year, we do our Toys for Tots shopping. It's growing every single year. We had about 10 or 11 people shop this past year with almost $200,000, and just, before I was a part of this, getting to see those pictures, first of all, as someone who donated from the very beginning, seeing those pictures, it's awesome to see that you contributed to part of that, but like that glow you feel, that warmth you feel with those literally cartfuls overflowing of toys, it's just so awesome. And now to be a part of it, like it legitimately is indescribable how cool it is.
It's beyond special, and what Fantasy Cares has grown into and where it's going. It's so much fun to witness, and the best is yet to come. Clearly, so from outside of Fantasy Cares, you're an established content creator in the space. What are you currently doing right now for content?
Okay, I do too much. I usually have to go through days of the week to remember what I really do. But I am one of the hosts of the Trade Addicts podcast. I'm currently on a little bit of a break from recording at night, and that is like one of the 2 things that do at night. So I'm not on every episode right now, but that's still going, that's still kicking. I'll be back there. Dynasty Wall Street for the Dynasty Trade Calculator podcast stream. The Grind is a weekly live stream on Peter Howard's YouTube and Twitch, and he does all of those things that he's older. No, he's younger than I am. Like, I'm a cranky old man. I know what YouTube is. I've heard of Twitch. I don't know. What else do I do? The DLF Trade Show on the DLF YouTube channel. Addison Hayes and I do that. Dynasty Game Night on the DLF family of podcasts. Speaking of DLF, John Bosch, Matt Price, Rocky Petrella, and I all do that. And I feel like there's like 6 more things that I do. I write during the off season. I write for DLF a Trading Post article, which is a weekly article that gets posted on Thursdays. Sorry for whoever I record with that I forgot, but I there's more. I just don't remember it.
The bottom line is there's a lot, and there's definitely a theme. You got Dynasty, you got trades. We'll get into some of this later, but you clearly have a passion for fantasy football. Take me back to when you first fell in love with football. Were you a big sports fan growing up?
I was a big sports fan growing up. When I was young, I born and raised New Jersey, and I grew up during, Phil Simms, Lawrence Taylor, and, my father who grew up in Brooklyn, huge Giants fan. So that's where I was. But like once I hit adolescence and I started making decisions for myself, like I went right into hockey. And, the Devils were first, becoming a legitimate franchise. They were just created in the 80s. So I don't have the attention span for multiple sports, I've learned. So like I went into hockey, I went in hard. And then in the early 2000s, hockey, the NHL went on strike like 3 times in 5 years. It felt like, I know it was not really that common, but I was just like, I can't handle this anymore. And then a friend literally handed me a copy of ESPN NFL 2K5 for Xbox, one with Terrell Owens making the one-handed grab on it. And my life has never been the same. I dove right into football, and it went hard, like never looked back.
I love it. So who were your favorite players growing up, like across all sports?
I'm always, let me rephrase this. I've never been good on offense at any sport I tried to play. So I was always a fan of the big guy, again, New Jersey, New York. I was a Patrick Ewing fan. I was a big Knicks fan. It was always the goalies for the Devils. You didn't really hit back then. There wasn't much. There was Chris Terreri, then there was Martin Brodeur, who played for 47 years. So that was nice and easy to stick through. And then, they took a break from the skills competition, but Ali Afraidy, who had the fastest slap shot in the league for like 10 years straight, big fan of those. And again, when you go to football, it's hard to be able to watch Lawrence Taylor weekly and not just be in awe of that human being. Well, he probably wasn't a human being. That's probably part of the problem. Yeah. And then getting back into football in like the 05 era, like that Ravens defense back then, from like 2000 and through there, like that's, again, I was always a big defense fan. So, finding Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and, those kind of players like really solidified me back into football.
Okay. So what do you think about my LOB and during the Seahawks run? Was that a good defense?
So like it's funny. Like I was a Seahawks fan for a long time.
Okay.
The Legion of Boom absolutely again helped that happen. It turned out into me just like caring more about my fantasy teams than I did about sport, like the actual teams. Sure. So like it's funny. All of my friends still say I'm a Seahawks fan, but like
really,
it's just like it maybe if they fired Pete Carroll like 6 years ago, I
love that
more on it.
That's great.
Yeah, but yeah. Oh man, Richard Sherman. My stepdad's name is also Richard Sherman. So like,
funny.
At the height of his football popularity, it was hilarious to walk down the street with a man named Richard Sherman. Also,
that's good. That's good.
But like, Cam Chancellor. There you go. That was a tough one to say. And Earl Thomas in the backfields was just like a thing of beauty to watch.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're singing to the choir. I love it.
I know. Like that was a softball I tossed to you.
I did not know I was getting that answer, but I love every second of it. So as a sports fan, like going back, do you have a one moment that was the worst loss you ever experienced?
In real sports, I will say, and I could say this literally, the most painful loss was the Seahawks Patriots Super Bowl. Because I'm literally, they're on the 2-yard line. I'm standing on a hardwood floor, jumping up and down. They throw the pick, and I literally just went face first into the ground. Oh. So, like, thankfully, no bloody nose, didn't break my nose or anything. But I literally just collapsed and went straight down. It was not physically great or emotionally.
Yeah, it was not fun for me either. That's for sure. How about a favorite moment in sports, like that from childhood or for even as an adult? Like, what was the best moment in sport as a sports fan that you've experienced?
See, again, it's funny. I said I'm not really a Seahawks fan anymore, but here I am again. When the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, my son was less than a year old. So I was watching the game in matching Seahawks jerseys. My birthday is June 1st. His is June 4th. So I was wearing a 61. He was wearing a 64. And literally anytime something good happened, I like lifted him in the air and started running in circles. So I have the happiness of the Seahawks doing well and his little giggles or terrified screams if I went too fast, like all of that, like in the memory bank. So if like that will, 50 years down the line, when I forget I was a Seahawks fan, that will still be like my happiest sports memory just because of all of that put together.
That's amazing because my daughter was also like probably 1.5-ish when that happened. So I'm, you're definitely jogging those memories for me.
Yep.
When Percy Harvin took that second half
Whoa.
kickoff back, and it was over. That was pretty magical.
Well, it was really funny because the reason I was holding on to him the whole time was because after that first Bronco snap that went like 30 yards backwards, I screamed so loudly it scared him. He was crying. So like at that point I was like, okay, shh, okay, let's go. And then at least when he was running in circles with me, he was having fun with it.
Well, that's great. I'm glad I didn't know this about you. So hey, my respect for you is up here. Now it's through the roof. I love it. When did you discover fantasy sports?
Earlier than I remembered at first. What's really fun, fantasy football happens very quickly. The guy that handed me that video game was already playing fantasy football, so I was indoctrinated immediately football-wise. But I actually started playing fantasy hockey before knowing it was called that. I am a good, pure soul that gets, brought to the dark side by other people. My brother goes to me, let's play a game for the NHL playoffs. Guy scores a goal, he gets 2 points. He gets an assist, he gets 1 point. Goalies let in a goal, they lose a point. And I'm like, this sounds like fun. Let's do this. And then a couple of our friends did it. And then a few years later, I was just like, hey, man, we were playing fantasy hockey. He's like, weird, right?
That's awesome. That's awesome. So when you finally got to playing organized fantasy sports that you knew, do you remember consuming content back then? Do you remember any of the analysts that you may have followed way back in the day?
So we're talking like early O's. So there's no one that. A lot of the names are honestly like still around. Like, of course, like Matthew Berry was still putting out stuff. Jamie Eisenberg was putting out stuff for CBS. I was reading him and Dave Richards were still putting out rankings and everything. So like that's really it. It wasn't much consuming content as it was rankings. And CBS was the start of my problem where they were the one place that put out a redraft trade value chart. So that was part of my growing, like, ooh, this is interesting. Okay.
The trade component of it. I gotcha. So when you first, started to like fantasy and it got you hooked, what was it about the game that you loved?
Honestly, I don't even really know like what it was that drew me in the first place. I think it, first of all, was just, fun with the people I was playing with because I had a core group of like 3 or 4. Again, we were playing like in a 6 or 8 team league because there was no real internet to go find people on back then. But it was just a lot of fun to play. It added an extra layer to watching the game. And then, of course, when you got more into it, clearly trading became my favorite part. But before the show, the league came out, it still was just about making fun of your friends. That's really what the beginning of fantasy sports was. And that's really the camaraderie it built was really probably the biggest part of it.
Yeah, I think that for most people, that's the core foundation is the league experience. And beating your friends or developing some rivals is huge in the experience of fantasy. Speaking of that, like, do you have one person that you would consider your biggest rival, whether it's an industry league or a home type league? One person that when you face them, you just have to beat them.
Brian Haar. This
That's
man
him,
was, first of all, he is an amazing human being. He was my original co-host on Trade Addicts podcast. I we are in several leagues together for several years. I don't know if I've ever beaten him before. And
Wow.
multiple championships, he's beat me by less than 2 points. Like, I love that man, but I hate him with every breath of my body. Like, it's
that's what it's all about right there.
Yep.
There's some people that just have it, whether it's, it's some random person in a home league that just has your number, or, if it's somebody again that you've met, outside, like an industry league. It seems like there's a lot of people out there that you just, you can't get past them. I love it. Do you have a favorite settings, formats? Obviously, something tells me you love Dynasty. Talk to me about your favorite settings and formats in fantasy.
Yeah. Dynasty is really all I do. The only non-Dynasty I really do these days is Scott Fishbowl, because who could say no to Scott Fishbowl? That's like the greatest. But once it gets into that, I'm at the point where settings matter a lot less than who's in the league with me. Like I said before, the original thing that brought me in was the camaraderie of it all. And while, of course, the game is a lot of fun itself, like I don't think there's anything I'm too connected to. It's funny. Like, I will always say, I do not league shame. You want to play in an 8-team league? Cool. You want to play 1 QB Superflex? Whatever makes you happy. You want to have a trade deadline? Look, I disagree, but good for you. That's fine. Except 2 tight end. That's wrong, and you should never play it. So like, that is literally my only spot. Like, I will play just about anything, but if you're putting in 2 tight ends, like, no thanks. But like, my first question is, hey Russ, you want to join a league? Assuming I'm not in 37 and can't take on another one, I'll just say who's in it, and that's really the rest of it. I'll figure it out as I go.
Yeah, I mean, the people definitely make a fantasy league. You're right. Settings, not necessarily what matters. Obviously, it's nice if you're in multiple leagues to have a variety. But you're right. It's the people you play with. That's what it's all about. You want a league that's engaged, and you can definitely tell, in advance, when you find out who's on the roster. I love it. So what is it about trades that intrigues you the most?
I don't even remember like what started it. Like, I have to believe that I made a trade once and it just worked out insanely in my favor. And then I've been chasing that high ever since. Like, that's the only thing I could think of. Like, I don't remember where it came from, but I just remember trying to do it more than anyone else. And like, in straight redrafts, trades are very, very rare. Our redraft league turned into a keeper league, which you get a little bit more. But then even at that point, I was in like 3 keeper leagues, and I was just like, I can't, I need, and then found Dynasty and never looked back.
Yeah, obviously with Dynasty, it's all about that roster construction and trading, and it's just, you just constantly want to build and modify and change, and sometimes you do too much, sometimes you do too little, but in the end, it's all about that roster construction. Do you have an all-time favorite trade that you can recall?
It's funny, like, at this point, I probably do too many to remember them, but I remember in my first year of Dynasty, was Dante Moncrief's rookie year. It may have been my second year already, but like, I remember this was the first time that there was a player that had this hype around him. Like, I don't know if you youngins listening remember, this was T.Y. Hilton was on the Colts, and this was like top 3-4 wide receiver in the league, T.Y. Hilton, and then they draft this guy named Dante Moncrief, who, back then the Matt Harmon bump was a thing, and he loved his route running. He loved Dante Moncrief, so he was a rookie wide receiver who wasn't really all that high drafted, but was like a 3rd round startup pick. And I lucked into him in the rookie draft, and I was just like, who wants Dante Moncrief? And so I traded Dante Moncrief, and at the time, saying Doug Baldwin in a first, it doesn't mean much anymore. But like, this was when Doug Baldwin, even though he was it means something to you.
It does.
Even though he was undrafted and all that, he was a top 10 producing wide receiver. So like, that took me, like, I won my first Dynasty league, and part of it was that trade. So that stays in that special place.
I like that. That's fun. Do you have an all-time worst trade that you can remember? A trade that brings you nightmares to this day?
So in that same league, at the end of that season after winning, and this actually changed the way I play, like learning lessons. So Steph Diggs was always very good, but don't forget he was drafted in the 5th. He was barely drafted in rookie drafts. Like he was like late second in rookie draft. So after his rookie year, it was just like, okay, he could be a thing. He's probably a thing. But also at the end of that year, Jay Ajayi was running for 200 yards a game. And I was like, my team is weak at running back. And of course, I look at that now and I'm like, it's February. My team's not weak at anything. What are you talking about? So I straight up traded Steph Diggs for Jay Ajayi. Steph Diggs is still crushing the league, and people listening probably don't remember who Jay Ajayi is.
If they had him on the roster, they'll remember those knees for sure. So when did you first start creating content, and what inspired that?
So what year is it? About in 2018 was when I first started. And, I was crawling into listening to podcasts and everything. And of course, back then there was far fewer than there are now. And the only trade podcast I found at the time was okay. Like it was good, but like one of the hard parts of doing what we do for an extended period of time is you sort of build yourself in a little bubble where you only end up playing in industry leagues, and then values sort of don't really correlate to the real world anymore. And it really, like, I'm sitting there listening and I'm like, what world do these values make sense anymore? What's going, I could do this. I mean, and the really funny thing at the time, I know it doesn't really sound like it because, of me podcasting 18,000 times and doing YouTube shows and everything, but I'm an insane introvert. Like, talking to people scares me. And in the middle of nowhere, I'm just like, I could podcast, even though I've never done it before. I've never talked on recording before. I've never done any of this stuff. And all of Trade Addicts came together at the same time, where my original idea was create these leagues and then have that podcast talk about the action that goes on in those leagues, because it's real world. Like, again, now looking back, realizing that every league is its own market. Just because someone's worth a first in one league doesn't mean he's worth a first in another. But it's still, it kind of, the idea struck with me because it couldn't be based in non-reality, because it was literally going to be based in reality. And it sort of is, that's what it is pretty much still. We still talk about the Trade Addicts trades every single week. And it's grown since that original concept in general. But like, that's really what it was. It was, again, there being like one trade related podcast, and I just didn't connect with it. So I was just like, I think I could try this. And of course, I've listened back to my original few and it was awful.
Well, it's great that you took that leap, especially if it's outside of your comfort zone, because it's paid off. I mean, you've been involved in so many different podcasts, so many shows over these last few years, a lot of years now, at this stage in on the calendar.
Yeah.
But talk to me about the DAP Network. I know that's kind of a, something that oversees a lot of these podcasts. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it really came down to like, yeah, I had a decent audience with Trade Addicts. And one of the things I loved about Trade Addicts, especially at the time, was we ended up being a lot of people's first podcasts, that come on and guest. Like, people would come on and guest and they're like, oh, I've never done this before. I'm like, I literally don't care. I don't know what I'm doing. Even though I'm doing this now, I still don't really know what I'm doing, but I've made it up as I'm going along well enough. So why should I penalize someone else for not knowing what they're doing? So a lot of people kept coming on and wanted to start making shows, and a lot of them were from Trade Addicts League. So I'm like, why not use what little reach I have to help my friends out? And that's really what the DAP Network started as. And that's really kind of what it is still to this day. It's just a podcast network that has, it has Trade Addicts, the Dynasty Junkies, which is, also hosted by Rocky Petrella, who is my Trade Addicts co-host now, and Scott Sidlow, who's filling in for me, and Get Real with Casey Kasem, who is just one of my favorite people in the world, and Fantasy Timeline with Josh Valentine, who again is, and Drew, who are also Trade Addicts people. So it really just was a podcast number to throw together to just, again, another reason to hang out with my friends.
That's awesome.
That's really what
I love it. I love that. What's been the most difficult challenge that you faced, over this time in the industry?
saying no and getting, buried. See, the thing with me is I legitimately don't know how many listens my shows get. I've literally never looked. I that's a lie. I looked once because DLF made me, but that was years ago at this point, so I don't even remember anymore. But like, it never mattered to me. It was always about if I found it fun, and the problem was I found it a lot of fun. And when you have a wife and kids, that becomes a problem when you keep saying yes to everybody. And at least now I work from home. I can record during the day a lot of the times, but back then I was recording 3-4 times at night, and that, especially when you're not paying attention, your family gets pretty upset about it. Like that's honestly that. And then finding that balance has always been my biggest hurdle, is, being present in both your house and in this community that this community means more than I could ever really admit. I found the Dynasty Twitter community when I was going through a rough time, and it literally, I call it a family. Like there's friends I've made who I call my brothers, and Casey is my sister. Like I love these people. Like I would love them if they were my legitimate family. So like being able to balance the worlds together is really honestly the only real problem, because like I said, like I've never cared about struggling to find a way to bring up my numbers, because I honestly don't know what they are. And I always say, like, if I started this now, I probably would fail miserably. But like I said, when I actually started my show, Dynasty Trades HQ, they beat me by 12 episodes. They were 12 episodes ahead of me. So like we were the 3 trade shows when I started. Now there's like 40, and a lot of them are very good. So like I still stick by now that if I started now, there's a chance I probably wouldn't even succeed. But I've been around forever, and like people feel too bad. Like, just let the old guy keep talking. It's fine.
I love it. No, but it's true. I mean, it's obviously it's always a challenge, no matter what you're doing in life, right? It's finding balance. But the fact that you found, such great relationships within the community, it's some of my favorite part about this fantasy community, right? You look at the evolution of it over the years, and especially with the introduction of like the expo and everything.
Oh yeah,
it's amazing if you step back and look at all the relationships that have been formed, friendships. When you talk about someone who's a brother or Casey being a sister, I mean it's real. Like it's like at one point back in the day, like there was a lot of online internet friends.
Yeah.
But it's definitely gone past that. And I was going to ask, what do you think about this community and what has it meant to you? You definitely just described quite a bit of that right there.
Yeah.
But talk to me about the expo and the experience, as an introvert going to an event like that, and how your experience has evolved over the years.
Well, to tie in our last conversation into this one, how when you used to tell people your internet friends, they would, look down on that. The very first expo, which was like 2018, 2019-ish, I go into my boss's office to request the time off. And she's like, what are you doing? Where are you going? You don't usually go places. I'm like, I'm going to Ohio to meet a bunch of strange men I met on the internet. Because at its core, that's exactly what I was doing.
It was 100%.
But like the expo, it's really funny because especially then when we first started recording our podcasts, like there was no Zoom, there was no StreamYard. We didn't see each other's faces at first. So I didn't know what a lot of these people looked like. And then, StreamYard came out, and, Google Hangouts was used for a while. But like, what's always been great was no matter how nervous I was, the second you walk into that expo, you feel at home. And it was like one of the most humbling experiences ever to just walk up to someone that you've talked to for years at this point, seeing them for the first time, and just I'm a hugger. So like I just like wrap my arms around people and never let go. And like what's amazing about the people in this community is like even to this day, where I've been to 4 or 5 expos, however many they've been, I've been to all of them. Especially me, like I've always been very honest about mental health and all of that stuff. Social anxiety is a huge thing with me. Like I'll be sitting in a circle of people talking, and someone will see my face and be like, you good? You want to go for a walk? Like, do you need to get out of this? And I'll be like, you're right, I do. Like they care, and it's not negative in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So like all of these people, like again, just to tie it back to how much this community means, like that's like that doesn't happen in the real world, but that happened at the expo, and that's why like I love all these people so much.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, the vast majority of people in the fantasy community are looking out for each other,
Yeah.
in so many different ways, whether it's professionally or personally. It's a great thing. So if you haven't been to the Fantasy Football Expo, definitely highly recommend you go. Canton, Ohio, every August.
Oh yes,
Just book
absolutely.
it. Once you go, you probably won't stop going because it's a special event.
You will not regret it.
Absolutely not. And obviously, we'll go back into like Fantasy Cares. How did you get involved with Fantasy Cares initially?
You know, it would be great if I really remembered what it was. I think the very first thing I did, it was Scott Fishbowl 10, I think, was the toys. And I helped Scott pare down the divisions because, when the theme is toys, you're going to have thousands of toys listed there. So he finally asked people for help, and I started doing that. And then when Scott Fishbowl 11 rolled around and it was music, me, Bob Gilchrist, and John Bosch just had so much fun with the divisions. And I mean, I'll say I'm creative, but I'm not talented. John is neither of those, but Bob is both creative and talented. So we started making designs for a couple of divisions just for fun. And then one day, John just, again, this is why we need John. John just shows them to Scott, and he literally just goes like, Scott, we're going to start making shirts, and here are some of the designs. And Scott was like, yeah, you should do that. And then it just grew from there. In 12, I'm wearing my SFB 12 shirt. We ended up doing tons of divisional shirts and everything like that. I did Avi Makers for a little bit, but then they just all got so much better than me. It wasn't worth it anymore. And then that drove me into, I mean, I'll throw heavy quotes around the phrase inner circle of Fantasy Cares, because that really just means Scott. And then we nudged him enough until he was willing to make it an official charity. And that's pretty much where we are, because that started last year.
Yeah. So what do you enjoy most about working with Fantasy Cares?
All right. So this is like the corniest thing I'll ever say. Like, this is legitimately like my dream. I always knew from a young age my day job was never going to be fulfilling in any way, shape, or form. I wanted to work at a video game store for the rest of my life, but then my wife said, I'm not going to be your wife unless you get a big boy job, which she was right, because make a lot of money and it's a lot of stress for no reason. And so, since no one was going to pay me to sit on my couch and watch movies all day, which there might be a job these days, but it's not one I got. It like, I always knew that my day job was never going to be fulfilling. And time went on, and I was trying to find something that just didn't leave me feeling empty. And fantasy football was the fill-in for that, because it wasn't a day job, but it was still, that's what I poured my actual passion into. And then, I found Scott saying donate to charity and stuff like this. And then I started paying attention to charity more than I ever have. And it turns into, working for a charity is probably the great combination of all of this. I'm good at spreadsheets. I've been working in accounts payable and receivable for 15 years. Let's try and see if I could put this into one spot. And while it's really hard to get a job at a charity, by the way, anyone out there, if you want to try, it's a lot of work. But then when this came along and Scott's like, you want to like really do this, I was just like, you literally don't know how much the answer is yes. So like, this is literally like the embodiment of hey, Russ, how's it going? Living the dream.
That's phenomenal. And it's not corny at all. Like, it makes sense. A lot of people have jobs out there that just don't, they get it done when it comes to, paying the bills and stuff, but
Yep.
they don't find that fulfillment. So you got to find fulfillment, and to find something like Fantasy Cares, the community, the fantasy football community, tie it all together, some of your passions, hobbies, put it all together. Yeah, I can see why that would be a dream like feeling. So I'm so thrilled for you. It's amazing. Scott Fish Bowl is amazing. Fantasy Cares, what you guys are doing, unbelievable. And again, the best is yet to come for sure. The Scott Fish Bowl live events, kicked off a couple years ago. I had the privilege of hosting one of the original ones, the Seattle one, back in or in SFB 12. Amazing event. Then I went to Trophy Smack last year in LA, and that was just out of this world. What's your experience been with SFB Lives? And talk to me a little bit about what's coming ahead this year for SFB Lives. I mean, obviously, don't give everything away, but talk to me about that.
I would be tarred and feathered if I gave everything away. But I remember the pictures from your live, and it looked great. So
it was special. It was special. It was a lot of fun.
So last year, I didn't go to the original year. 11, I think the 12 was the original lives. I didn't get to go to any of them. But last year there was one in New York City, and again, I live in New Jersey, so it's like a 40-minute bus ride. So, and then the Jerks in Philly did it the same day as New York, so I couldn't go to both. I didn't draft live because I can't handle that pressure of that many drunken people in drafting live. Like, give me 12 people in a room and draft, and I can handle that. But 2 drafts going at the same time with other people there to watch, I will crumble.
Totally fair.
So yeah, it was, again, exactly like I said about the expo. Like, I knew maybe 4 or 5 people there, but it did not matter. You walk in there, you're talking to people like you knew them anyway. You hear one of my favorite parts of the expo and just these situations in general. Like, I'll walk in, I'll shake hands, like, hey, my name's Russ. And you get that blank stare. And I'm like, Dynasty Outhouse. Hey, one of those things. So that always legitimately still makes me happy when, people know me as Outhouse, which was for the first 2-3 years of doing this. I tried to keep my real name out of it, not because I cared about the anonymity whatsoever. I just thought it was hilarious to make people call me Outhouse. But it was so great. You walk into the live events and everyone's there to have a good time. And it's, again, for charity. It's for the fun of it. And it's electric.
Yeah. I mean, they're like mini expos. Lots of incredible, twists to it, right? Just the coolest thing about the live events is that they're all different. Every city's different, right? You're getting a different experience, all unique to that city. A lot of cities coming back this year, some more to come, but obviously it hasn't been announced yet.
Right. I ducked out of that last part because I got a little worried. So we just released yesterday, I believe, or whenever you're going to end up releasing this, a couple of days ago, maybe, our returning cities. I think we listed, I'm not going to say a number because if I'm wrong, I'll get in trouble that if I said too high of a number, but a bunch of the returning cities got listed in the amazing Bob Gilchrist Star Wars-esque video, which I still get goosebumps. Well, I'm a huge Star Wars. I'm wearing a Star Wars cardigan as we talk about this. Like, I see that scroll and I get goosebumps.
Sure.
But yeah, it hurt watching these people reply, like, what about this city? What about this city? And in my head, I'm like, just wait, please. Like, I can't say, yeah, don't worry, but don't worry. Like, there's plenty more to be announced, and we are hoping that it just keeps growing and growing because we want everyone to be part of these. Again, even if you don't want to draft at these live events, you should go to them anyway because they're just so much fun.
Yeah, and they're being spread out over more time.
Yes.
So it is easier to attend, whether it's multiple or, again, in your case, hopefully you can go to a New York and a Philly, right?
We're trying to get close proximity ones, definitely not on the same day.
Yeah, and the key is to try to get, have Scott probably have an option to go to more than one. So
Scott will absolutely
more than
be
a couple.
party hopping.
Yes, indeed. It's exciting times. Talk to me about a little bit about the YouTube channel, some of the giveaways you guys are doing for Scott Fish Bowl tickets, everything you're doing on that front.
Yes, we have our golden tickets. We at Fantasy Cares.org on YouTube, on everything, is Fantasy Cares.org, all of our social media. Except for Facebook, we're just Fantasy Cares, but it's Facebook. I have to remember we have a Facebook. We go live as much, not right now, all that much, but once SFB season rolls around, we're probably going live every day to give spots away because there's just so many spots right now. but we love giving stuff away, to much of Scott's chagrin. Especially like during the season, I would go live once a week to do a week in SFB roundup, and we would always give away a Funko Pop or a signed jersey. We have, we call them golden tickets now because it's movie themed and we love some Willy Wonka. So we have the golden tickets into Scott Fishbowl. I highly recommend subscribing to Fantasy Cares Org on YouTube and hitting that bell to get notified, because we sometimes do just randomly go live and we will give stuff away to people who happen to be watching at the time. And I mean, let's face it, it's awesome to give away Funko Pops. It's awesome to give away signed jerseys, but those things cost money, which means we have to buy them and spend money to get them. Giving away spots into Scott Fishbowl costs us $0. So we give them away. So keep your eyes out on all. And then, oh man, I last year was great. Last year was food. So we had people take pictures with certain foods that were divisions. When it came to like Tootsie Roll, we had people doing the Tootsie Roll, the dance from that was either the 90s or 2000s. This is movies. We are be prepared to reenact some amazing movie scenes, because we are going to do so many contests on all of our social medias and giving spots away for them. And I am absolutely jumping in. I don't care. The second they told me it was going to be movies, I said, I hope you're ready for how much of a fool I'm going to make of myself.
I love it. It's such a cool theme. And it's when you think about the merch and everything, all the different, logos, like there's so much to be excited for, so much to look forward to when it comes to SFB 14 merch. I can't wait till that stuff comes out. But you got that 3-pack now that people can kind of, get on early. I think that with that Blockbuster, Netflix, and Warner Brothers, is that's the theme, right?
You got it. Again,
Amazing.
Movie themed. So we wanted to go broad. So we went with our main logo is a play on the Blockbuster logo.
Yeah.
FantasyCares.org/early access is where you can go to donate to get a thank you gift of that 3-pack. It's a nice blue shirt with the Blockbuster-esque logo. It is a red shirt that says SFB 14 and charity. The original version did say SFB 14 and chill, but I was like, maybe we avoid that kind of stuff on our charity-based shirts.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. And then just the Warner Brothers logo is just so cool. Like, the SFB, and because there's a B in Warner, it just fits so perfectly. And I can't wait to have far too many SFB shirts as usual.
I think there'll be records set on personal acquisitions of SFB merch this year for sure. Well, I would say one of my favorite things though with the YouTube channel and everything is I have, everyone's got their home leagues, right? People that aren't necessarily, all in on this community and aren't as connected, or they just play fantasy. They love it. I got people in my home league that just love tuning in every day. They're always sending me, clips of you guys, and I'm like, those are my guys. and like I got Mark Perkoski, he's in my league. He listens to you guys all the time. He's always trying to right? Yeah, I mean, he's just a great guy, and he loves what you guys are doing. And I think that I think there's home leagues all over the country that have that might have connections to people that are involved in fantasy, that also have gravitated towards learning about Scott Fish, wanting to be involved in Scott Fishbowl, and you guys are just doing incredible work.
Well,
So
I mean, that's really what we want Scott Fishbowl to be, is like the world's biggest home league, because like that's the best part from the very beginning. The best part of SFB was I remember I absolutely cheated. The first SFB I was in was 8, I want to say it was, where it was TV. And I happened to just find out at that time that Scott was a big fan of Doctor Who. I also happened to be a big fan of Doctor Who. So I immediately went to get into that division, and Scott was in there. And that is how I crept in. That was the start of all of it. And when it was location, so 12, there was it 12? No, it was music. When it was 11, there was a division of Captain Geach and the Shrimp Shack Shooters, which, if you're not a huge nerd, that was the fake band in That Thing You Do that they played in a movie. And I had found out that Tom Everett Scott was going to be in Scott Fishbowl. And I'm like, there's no way he's not in this division.
That's
I'm
awesome.
one of the nerds that know who Captain Geach and the Shrimp Shack Shooters is. And I got to, talk with Tom Everett Scott a little bit. And it's I still geek out about that, he knows my name.
That's awesome.
So like that's really the goal of Scott Fishbowl, is to get people in and not just to play and walk away. Like, we want people to make long connections after this. You know, the amount of people we hear like, oh, I got into content creation because I talked to people in SFB and all of that stuff. Like, that's what we want. And just to tie that back in, like, one of the things I love about us going live is I don't think we will ever be prepared for when we go live. Like, we stumble through everything because we want it to be silly. We want it to be fun. Of course, everything we do is above the level and everything like that. Like, our randomizers are not loaded for anyone. Like, everything is absolutely on board, but like, we have fun just making it up as we go along because we want to build a community. We want everyone to feel like we're friends. We don't want to feel like hosts of something. We want to feel like you're just like, if you had the link, you would be there and you would fit in completely, which I feel like is the case with a lot of the people that hang out with us all the time because they seem funnier than I am.
Well, you guys are doing a great job with it. Keep
Thanks.
up the great work. Can't wait to see what comes of it, because it's, it's going in an awesome direction. I love it. Let's dive into some rapid fire questions. I'll just throw out a question. Give me what first comes to mind. What do you love? What do you enjoy most about what you're doing in the industry in regards to the content creation?
I don't even know. Like, it's weird. I can't even explain why I find this fun. Cause like I said before, I'm not the most outgoing person in the world, but like the second we start talking fantasy football, that shyness melts away. And maybe that's part of what I love. Maybe I love that, like, this lets me out of my shell a little bit. And it's weirdly gotten me better at talking to human beings outside of fantasy football. So I really think the thing about content creation I love the most is really just getting to be a little bit more of myself than I am in the real world.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. When are vetoes in fantasy football warranted?
Never. Literally never. Okay, so I need to qualify this. I know you said quick fire, but this is a topic.
Okay. The question is rapid fire. The answers don't have to be.
All right. So when I originally I used to have a merch shop that got taken over by SFB, but one of the first things I ever put out was a shirt that said #never-veto. And you should never veto trades because you don't know better. As long as two people are happy with what they did or they're both unhappy, right? Like, I've absolutely walked away from trades where we're both like, man, I feel like we've made a mistake. But that usually means it's a good trade in general. As long as there's no cheating involved and two people made a trade of relatively sober minds. I've made plenty of drunk trades, but you live with that. There's no reason to veto it. No trade has ever ruined a league. Like I said before, I don't have trade deadlines in my leagues. I don't care what the trade is, when it is. You don't veto trades. And I will qualify by saying, if there's collusion, that's not vetoing. You are canceling that trade and kicking people out of your league. That doesn't count as vetoing. So I will say that, because that is always everyone's answer. What about cheating? What about collusion? That's not vetoing. That is fixing cheating. So like straight up vetoing, it should never happen, because you will find many people thinking they'll win a trade when they get Jay Ajayi, but Steph Diggs is really the answer.
Yeah, for sure. I love it. So when I ask you league vote or commish vote, I know what you're going to answer. Let's just say, what do you think about people that love the league vote?
League vote is the worst because that is cheating. Someone gets a better trade. Like, what's the most common response when people see a trade go down in their league? Oh, I would have paid more for that. So why wouldn't I vote against it? I will say, if you feel the need to have some sort of review, I almost like board or committee, but that's a little too serious sounding. I have a friend, he's my cousin, who runs a keeper league, and I am not in it, but I am his review board. So he'll throw trades by me, and if it just seems way too egregious, I don't think I've ever vetoed a trade, by the way, because you have people that want to win or want to rebuild. Again, as long as it doesn't feel like it's complete cheating, you let the trades go through. But like, usually if you need to have some sort of review, if you insanely trust your commissioner, which you really should, just to put that out there, if you don't trust your commissioner, you shouldn't be in that league. Fine, sort of. But since they are also a manager in that league, most likely, like, you push it off to an uninvolved third party.
Yeah, and something you said early on about, when someone invites you to a league and you want to know who the people are in it,
Yep,
it's part of the reason, right? You want to have a league where you trust the people in the league, right? And if,
absolutely.
if you have a great league with good people, you're not going to find cheating, right? So just
Exactly.
let those trades fly. I love it. What are your favorite hobbies and activities outside of sports?
I don't have those. Yeah, like I said before, I'm very monofocused. Fantasy football is really just my jam. When I'm not doing that, it's the family thing. I have an 8 and a 10-year-old, so they take up far too much of my attention. Other than that, like I like TV and cartoons, and I miss going to the movie theater so much, but there's just not enough time in the world.
Sure. Do you have an all-time favorite TV show?
I saw these questions, and then there's the all-time favorite movie question, which is just far too hard to answer. I'm gonna skip to the one you asked, like, what's the most recent show I binged or watched?
Sure.
Um, I'm almost done with season 5 of Brooklyn Nine-Nine on my third
Mm.
watch through. My most binged shows are I constantly watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Good Place, and Parks and Rec, which are all by the same people. So there's definitely that feeling of comfort when you see the same actors just keep showing up over and over
Yeah,
again.
yeah.
Avatar: The Last Airbender, the cartoon, and so I just got to watch the live action one, which I liked.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not the original, but it never is. The cartoon is just one of my favorite things. Like that's one of my real big comfort shows.
Do you have a favorite sports movie? I'll skip the movie one. Do you have a sports movie that you
Well,
say
I
is
can
your
list a
favorite?
couple of movies. Again,
Okay.
like when
Yeah.
you say what's your favorite movie, I'm like, for what?
You need categories, right? I know. I
Right.
agree. I
Like,
agree.
I will say when I need to give an answer when someone says what's your favorite movie, my answer is Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Jessica Rabbit. I love it. That's good. That's
Like
good.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit to me is the pinnacle of amazement because first of all, they have never made a movie that looks as good when they're crossing real life and animation ever since. Of course, now with CG and all that stuff, it's a lot easier. But like hand drawing, it never looked as good as it did back in what was that, like 1986?
Yeah.
Um, I like if I'm sad and I need some sadness in my life. Nightmare Before Christmas is my catharsis movie. Like I watch that and like I sing and cry along and just like feel great afterwards. My favorite comedy is Blazing Saddles. My favorite drama, I think, is still like Devil's Advocate.
Okay. Okay.
Keanu and Al Pacino, like that movie is
Yeah.
just so good. And The Dark Knight is I'm a huge Batman fan, so the Dark like Heath Ledger's Joker will just be one of my favorite things ever in the world. My
Yeah.
favorite
Fantastic.
sports movie, like that's always been tough for me because while I love sports, I've never been super attached to sports movies. But I will say,
Sure.
The Replacements is easily one of is my favorite football movie. Like I love like Necessary Roughness and of course Rudy, and if I want to cry, I'll watch Brian's song. But like The Replacements has everything. Um, but my favorite sports movies is Miracle because that was
Mm.
the first movie I watched where I'm like, this looks like people playing the sport.
Mm.
Like I'll never forget as a kid watching the Mighty Ducks and watching someone raise their hockey stick above their head and swing and hit someone in the arm and get a 2-minute penalty. I was just like, hold on a second. Like the sports action was always so bad it was tough to get through.
That's a
But
good
then
answer.
Miracle happened and I'm just like, what is this? This is so good.
That's a good answer. It's true. With sports movies, a lot of the actual sports in the movies not all that good. But I like that answer. I love the Roger Rabbit answer though too. I mean, that was one of my favorite or favorite movies growing up for sure.
And I did
Uh,
not grow up, so it's still my favorite movie. Yeah.
there you go. Okay, I'm with you on that then. How about a favorite musician or band or artist?
That changes with the times. My music preference is usually like 20 years behind the times. I was a big Foo Fighters fan for a long time, and then I got introduced to early 2000s emo music, so I'm like ridiculously into Fall Out Boy at the moment. But like growing up, I mean, I grew up in the 80s and 90s where like music was good, but it was even like as a child where I didn't know what the word commercialized meant. It was very commercialized. So
Sure.
even like Nirvana, who Kurt Cobain never wanted his music to be, mainstream, was mainstream. Like, don't get me like I will listen to the Red Hot Chili Peppers all day, every day if I could. But like you go back and when you like, how do you listen to like the Beatles and the Who and like this music from the 60s and 70s and not be like, this is the greatest stuff ever made?
Yeah.
So like, if I have to say like who's the like my favorite, like I'll give the cheesy answer, say someone like Fall Out Boy and Panic at the Disco right now, which is who I can just listen to on repeat. But like the best, like just old time music is just so good.
Do you listen to any podcasts outside of sports? Any favorites?
Not really. Working from home has ruined my podcast listening. Like I would listen to fantasy football podcasts, and then I got into audiobooks. So I never really like expanded my podcast listening. Nowadays, I barely listen to any. And I feel bad because so many of my friends have podcasts and I just don't listen to any of them anymore. Like I used to listen to literally 30 plus podcasts. And that was when I was driving for 45 to an hour and a half. I don't know if anybody here has ever driven on the New Jersey Turnpike during rush hour, but you never know what your commute's going to be.
So you have to line up 30 podcasts.
Yeah. So, yeah, but nowadays I barely listen to any of them and I feel terrible about it. But yeah, definitely no, like I always pretty much stuck to sports when it came to podcasts.
What are you most grateful for at this time?
In the like people again, like I know it maybe it's broken record at this point, but like that's really what it is. Like I said, like I'm taking a break from recording at night, so I've barely been on the Trade Addicts podcast, which is my baby from 5-6 years ago. Actually, it is the 19th as we record. 3/31/18 was the release of my first episode, so coming on to 6 years. Like that's my baby. But like,
wow,
the support I've had from the people filling in for me and the people that listen when I was taking my time off, they're like, yeah, you earned it, man. Go rest, go do what you need to do. And like, I was nervous about it. Like, of course I care more about my family. Like, I'm not going to choose my podcast over my wife and children, but like, I was still nervous when I was just like, all right, I'm going to take time off. And everyone was just so supportive and it like legitimately put me at ease to be able to get something out of it. Taking time off while you're just insanely anxious the entire time isn't really time off.
No.
So these people, like everyone just being so supportive and so awesome about everything is really just, will be eternally grateful that I will never be able to express. Like, because like I said, I found this community at a time where I needed a community, and they have put their arms around me and never let go.
And I'm sure there's a countless list of people, but can you name a few people that just had a huge impact on you during your journey?
Zach Reed and J Mike. They're the Dynasty dummies right now. They are the two people I literally say I call them my brothers. Like they're just amazing people. Brian Haar, again, like he was my original podcast co-host and we'd never talked to each other at the time. I was putting my podcast together and I'm like, hey, he's like, hey, can I guest on your show? And I'm like, do you want to guest on my show every week? And we had never talked to each other. And like, we just bonded immediately. And so that relationship coming together so easily really helped me be open to talking to these people that I've never met before. And then, Scott Fish, of course, John Bosch, all these people that brought me into Fantasy Cares, and Ryan McDowell is an amazing human being as well. And, I, still do stuff with DLF. So I, work closely with him a lot. And just like, I could sit here listing people all day, and I apologize for anyone that I left out in any of this because my memory's awful, and I'm gonna message people the second we stop. I'm gonna be like, I was listing people that I care about and I forgot you and I'm sorry. Like it's absolutely gonna happen. And there's just like literally everyone. If you've ever read one of my tweets, if you ever listened to one of my podcasts or seen my face on a YouTube show, I appreciate the hell out of you, because again, like I said before, like this stuff allows me to feel like I'm being me more than I can if I'm in a room of people, because there's less anxiety in this right now than there is in real life. So like this, being able to do this kind of stuff is just amazing for me.
I love it. And the solution to not being able to, touch everybody is big hugs, long hugs that never end in Canton, Ohio, right?
Oh, absolutely. And if you just come up to me and say, hey, Russ, you tell me who you are, I will hug you. I ask first because, I've hugged strangers before by accident. And I'm like, oh, hey, I'm not here for the expo. I was just walking by and I was going to ask you where the bathroom is. Sorry. Okay, that didn't actually happen, but it was just really funny.
It might in 2024. What advice do you have for people that want to get more involved in the community, with content creation or, in any way, getting involved with Fantasy Cares, all the good stuff?
Do it. Like, it's really, like I said in the very beginning when I was talking about my podcasting experience, but when I decided to do a podcast, I had never tried it before. I didn't own a microphone. I didn't know how to do it. I literally just Googled, how do you do a podcast? That's literally all I did. And I just kept doing it. So when you go into it with the right reasons, again, like if you're going into this for the money, you're picking a really hard road. Let me tell you that. I am not rolling around in podcast money in any way, shape, or form. Like, I might trip over a couple of pennies every once in a while, and that's the equivalent of my podcast money. But if you go into this for the fun of it, just keep going because it's fun. It really, really is. And you meet some amazing people along the way. And when it comes to like Fantasy Cares and all of that stuff, literally just be there, be involved. Like, I know a lot of the streaming we do is in the middle of the day and not everyone can be there for that. But like, comment on social media. If you ever have a spare few dollars, donate, and all of that's like, just be there, be part of it, because even if you don't grasp the greater zeitgeist of Scott Fishbowl, you'll be, if you don't get in every year, still hang around, still be part of it. There's mirror leagues, there's satellite leagues, and again, the point of all of it is the connections you make along the way. You'll find so many people that are in every similar life situation you are in this community that also have the built-in conversation piece of you both love fantasy football.
I love it. Well said. Absolutely well said. Is there anything that we haven't covered before we close things out on this episode?
Not really, man. I mean, I talk a lot and I don't necessarily listen when I talk, so I'm sure I said a lot of great things. But fantasycares.org is really what everything is all about. If you can donate, that's amazing. If not, hit the like or retweet button, or whatever that is, comment on things, help push the social media aspect of all of it. And again, even if you don't want to donate to Fantasy Cares, donate to somebody, donate to some sort of charity. Try and put good out into the world, because the world needs it. So like, that's really it. Just go do good, be good.
That's the message right there. Where can listeners and viewers find you on social media? And briefly, what's the origin of the Twitter handle?
I forgot about that. Yeah, so I'm at Dynasty Outhouse on Twitter, and it started as a joke because, again, I've been around for a very long time, and like 6-7 years ago, a lot of Twitter handles started showing up with at FF or at Dynasty before it. Again, like, that's very mainstream now, but it wasn't back then. And we'll just say a lot of the people were, we'll say, arrogant, as a nice word. And my friends and I actually made, as a joke, and I came up with the name Dynasty Outhouse because outhouses are full of poop. So like that's so we could always just, we were literally saying we're full of shit. And so what we would do is, it was like a borderline troll account at the beginning. Like, we would find trade posts and like we would answer like, hey, who do you like in this trade? This guy or this guy? I would log in. I would do this. My friend would then later log in, and we would start arguing with ourselves with the same handle. Like, it was something to do. We were bored pretty much. And then, of course, with all things that start out with such a stupid reason, they lost interest in like 2 minutes. And then like I started, and this is really fun. Like, I'm having a lot of fun answering these trade polls. And again, back then, there was like 3 people that retweeted trade polls. There was at Dynasty Trades, DLF, Dynasty Trade Calculator, and the My Fantasy League Twitter account. Those were the 4 people. So I went in, I answered every trade poll, I commented on every trade poll, and I retweeted every trade poll. Again, nothing new now. Like, I would not have a following whatsoever right now. But the fact is, I did it 7 years ago. And again, I think people just feel bad at this point. They're like, let the old guy keep yelling at the clouds. So yeah, my name started as a joke, and I just never let go of it.
The rest is history. Dynasty Outhouse right there, Russ Fisher. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. I can't wait to see what's next for you. Best of luck with everything. Scott Fish Bowl 14, Fantasy Cares. Can't wait to see where things go with that, and looking forward to seeing Canton, my man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. This was a blast. And yes, you will definitely be the recipient of one of my gigantic hugs when I see you again.
Sounds good, buddy. All right, we're rolling. Nothing, whatever just happened, did not happen.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football Unlimited podcast. Until next time, be sure to follow and subscribe to all of FFU's social media accounts for daily content.